right. Hey, everybody. How are you? This is the Otherppl show. It's good to be with you. Thank you for listening. This is going to be a good one. Today on the program, my guest is Marcy Dermansky, author of the novel Hurricane Girl.
My writing teachers in graduate school, Frederick Bartholomew, it kind of blew my mind at the time. He's like, why don't you start your books, not just to me, he tells everyone, on your first line. Like, if this is somebody's 50th anniversary party, why wait till the middle of page 2? Tell us on the first line. And so I do try to do that in my books. Like, the first paragraph, it's already starting. Like, you don't want to take your time. And that's not because people tell you that an agent reads the first 3 pages. It's because that's what's better for books. So you have to start right away.
All right, there we have it. That is Marcy Dermansky. Her new novel is called Hurricane Girl, and it is available from Alfred A. Knopf. This is Marcy's first time on the Otherppl show. Very happy to have her here. That conversation will be happening momentarily. Today's episode is brought to you by Texas Tech University Press. Texas Tech University Press is proud to announce a new publishing collaboration with the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network, or DVAN. DVAN promotes nonfiction, fiction, and poetry to empower Vietnamese artists. The first publication from TTUP and DVAN is the novel Constellations of Eve. In this philosophical fable of art and fate, Abigail Wynne Rosewood paints a world that floats above our own and contours the infinitesimal moments that shape who we love, over whom we obsess, and how we decide what to live for. The book is available now. To learn more about Constellations of Eve by Abigail Wynne Rosewood, or to learn about other DVAN books, visit ttupress.org. This episode is also made possible by Tennant's Cove Writers Retreat. Are you a writer? Are you working on a book? Do you need to get book work done? Are you looking for a concentrated period of time in which to make great progress? If you are this person, you should check out Tennant's Cove Writers Retreat. It's a new retreat and workshop that offers rustic and rural glamping, as well as a warm and inspiring creative community. It is all happening this summer on a nature preserve of 150 acres in New Brunswick, Canada, from August 7th through the 14th. That's this summer, August 7th through the 14th. The retreat is hosted and moderated by Melissa Scholes-Young, author of the novel Hive, and Peter von Zagazar, author of the memoir The Looking Glass Brother. On-site tuition plus room and board is $2,500, and there are 4 spots available. There might be less than that at this point. This is a limited opportunity retreat. It is intimate. Participants can also arrange a full manuscript review for an additional fee. At Tennant's Cove, they are looking for serious writers who seriously want to go into retreat and make some big progress on their writing. For more information, visit tenantscovewriters.com. That's TENNANTS covewriters.com, and join the retreat this summer from August 7th through the 14th. One more time, the website is tenantscovewriters.com. Okay, so the guest today is Marcy Dermansky. She has a new novel out on Knopf. It is called Hurricane Girl, and it is generating a lot of buzz. This is Marcy Dermansky's 5th novel. Her other books are called Very Nice, The Red Car, Bad Marie, and Twins. She has received fellowships from the MacDowell Colony and the Edward Albee Foundation. She also won the Carson McCullers Short Story Prize. I am very pleased to have Marcy on this show. I've known her for a while, many years. Known of her, known her. She worked with me a bit on my own book. So just great to have her here and to get a chance to celebrate the publication of this new novel of hers. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. This is Marcy Dermansky, and the new book, one more time, is called Hurricane Girl.
I don't write that often is how it feels like. I feel like I spend more time not writing than writing. So sometimes I think I should have written more novels. I don't know.
Okay. So
yeah.
this ratio,
Yeah.
do you feel like there's something creative happening in the downtime or in the fallow periods? Like, are you like consuming a lot more? Are you reading a lot more? Are you ruminating on what you might do and trying to like gather information and ideas? Or is it truly just like you're off in another place and then eventually you come back and start getting creative again?
Right. Your first answer sounds better, that I'm ruminating and I want to just say yes to that. But I think sometimes that when I finish a book, I just feel like done, and I don't have new ideas that come right away, and I'm always really scared to begin something new. And so I think part of my writing process that I always try to avoid at the end of every book, but I never do, is I have to not write for so long that I start to feel really like bad. Like, why am I not writing? And then I start again, and then it all works out.
So what is this, the fear of beginning? Like, it's the feeling of, oh, I don't have any ideas. What am I going to do? It's the
it's that blank page I find really overwhelming. And then I actually love writing, but I just hate starting things. And then I always wonder, is this really worth what I'm going to work on? So I just put too much pressure on it and I don't begin.
And then is there a way that your novels tend to begin? Is there a common thread?
I just feel like it's right, and I just keep going. I don't think there's a common thread.
Okay, and it's an intuition. Like,
it's just intuition. I don't have an outline. Usually I always start and I don't know what I'm going to write, and I just type. And a lot of times I just type, and I'll type for an hour and a half. I'll be like, oh, that's dumb, or that's not anything. And then I just won't, I might save it, but I won't open it. And then I'll start a new day, and it's a new blank document and a new blank document. And sometimes it turns into journal writing. And then I finally write something. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just keep going on this. And I don't really know that it's going to be my next novel till I'm about 40 pages in.
Okay. 'Cause like, this is the thing for me that I find challenging, is sustaining energy over the course of a long project, over the course of time. And so, in whatever experience I've had writing novels, I find that I think I need to have a real emotional investment in the material in order to get going and stay there and see it through. And maybe that's true for everybody, but I sort of suspect, and I'm wondering if this is the case for you, that there are writers out there who don't need to have like some deep personal emotional investment. They can actually just be like super into the story and like entertained by it. Is that the case, or is the way that I do it more closer to the truth for you?
I think the way you do it is more closer to the truth for me, except I can't live with things for that long because I get really frustrated. Like, I know with your last book, which I loved, you did many, many drafts and you worked so hard on it. And I get to a place where if I overwork my material, it feels dead to me. And so I can't work on something for too long. And so, but I have to love it. And I feel like this book is complete fiction. I mean, that could jump over other questions, but I feel like more and more like details from my life, it just makes the work more relevant to me. Like, if I put my coffee cup into the book that I'm writing, it really pleases me. And all through Hurricane Girl, there's so many little tiny pieces of me that most people won't recognize, and they're not necessarily significant. Like, my water bottle is in that book. And it just really makes it more meaningful to me when I do that.
Yeah, no, I kind of sensed that, like there were Easter eggs in there, or like little.
So many Easter eggs.
Yeah, but I think maybe because I'm a writer, I could feel it, or I noticed it more, and I could imagine you having fun with it. It's just like a nice.
I love it. You get these like bing, bing, bing moments where it just makes you so happy. Like, I actually love to write when it's going well, which is why it's so surprising to me there are so many periods when I'm not, because writing is just so great, I feel like.
I think like what you said earlier about how if you like, there is such a thing as overwriting or working on a project too long to the point where it becomes dead. And that was certainly the case for me in like failed iterations. And then in the iteration that wound up working, which is an extension, I guess, I guess it's connected to the others in some ways, but really it's its own thing, and it came out relatively quickly. And I feel like this is the case most of the time with writing in any form, is that when it's going well and it's working, it's not that it isn't arduous and it doesn't take some significant time to write a book, but it does tend to kind of shoot out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has been the case of all of my books, and there are times when I'm struggling and I don't know what to do with the plot, and I just forge ahead. And the times when I'm struggling and I don't really respect it, but keep on trying to write anyway, which seems like great advice, like keep on working. Those are always the pages that are just bad, that are boring or forced, and those are the pages. And I cut a lot of work a lot of times. Like I cut a lot of pages from this book if I don't really feel it, what I'm writing is, it's so easy to write another sentence in a paragraph in a page. It's so easy to do, but if it's not working for you, sometimes I think forcing yourself isn't the best thing because the material just isn't good.
So with Hurricane Girl, I think I read, maybe it was in the acknowledgments even, there were times when you felt blocked or you felt like you were kind of like lost in the text or lost in the narrative.
A little bit, yeah.
What were there things that you did that helped you find your way back in, or was it just kind of waiting it out? Sometimes you just have to wait it out, I find, you know?
I mean, in this case, it wasn't even waiting it out. I just sort of forged to an ending, and then I don't have a lot of readers when I work. I have one reader who's a friend, and she just says everything is wonderful, and I just love her because I feel like praise is just so important to my writing. I just rely on it so much. And then my other reader, which is a little tricky, is my agent because we've just been together since 2005, like my whole career. And so he reads it, and he was really, really enthusiastic about this book, but he actually said, "Is that the end?" He's like, "You can't end it this way. You have to make something happen." And he doesn't tell me what to do, but he's just like, "Look, you have this huge thing happen, and you don't address it." And I don't know if he knew I was going to do that, but after I talked to him, I cut 100 pages, and then I just wrote a completely different direction, and then I wrote the end, and then it was just right. You know, then I didn't have to, I mean, I revised it like sentence level, but once I went back to it and made the big thing happen that needed to happen, then we were good.
It's a lot of pages.
Yeah, especially when your book is only 240 pages, so.
But I think, I don't know, I was saying this to you before we came on the line.
Yeah.
This book, I tore through it.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to read, and it goes down easily. And
yeah.
I always appreciate that because what it makes me feel like is I feel like the author did the work. Mm-hmm. I'm not having to like grind it out to read it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like I'm inhaling it, and that's what you always want, I feel like, as a reader, or at least that's what I want.
Right, I want that too. There are too many books where you put them down and then it's just difficult to put them back up, and I never want that to be the experience with my work.
But it's also like the speed of the read or something. Like, it's so strange because the words are laid out on the page no differently than they are in any other book, but for some reason I'm reading them more easily, and I think that might have something to do with the prose style and just the craftsmanship. Like, that's an interesting question to ask. It's like, why do some books feel like they're happening in slow motion for me? I guess maybe they're just not speaking to me. Whereas, you know, this book and the work that you do and maybe the way that you write, that music, you know, just kind of goes down easily for me.
I mean, I really do. It's not quite music, but I really do care a lot about how my sentences sound. Like, they're short and I repeat things. And there just has to be a rhythm to it that feels important when I'm writing. Like, I can hear it when I'm working. So I don't know if other writers write that way.
Well, yeah. I wanted to talk to you about this because the word that kept occurring to me as I was reading this book was offbeat.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That's a musical word. And yeah, I think so. Because, offbeat in terms of its humor, but also offbeat.
That's how I think of it.
Yeah, but I think also offbeat in terms of like the music of the prose, like not to get precious about it. But I want to say I was reading something about Willie Nelson and how he, like something like one of the appeals of his music is that he's always singing like just like a millimeter behind the beat. Mm-hmm. But yet it's always right there. Like, his timing is actually excellent, but it's just like a little bit off the beat. Right. And I was thinking about that for some reason as I was reading, because I was like, wow, this is having like an interesting effect on me, like the music of this language, the voice of the book. And then the other person that I was thinking about as I was reading your book was Hemingway.
Really?
Not because it was like a one-for-one like comparison, but just because there's a clarity and simplicity to his prose that I think your book shares, at least to some extent. Your writing is clear as a bell, and the sentence the sentence constructions are pretty. It's like short, declarative. It's deceptively simple, and there's like a strange and very personal music to it. And it makes me sit around going, well, how did she do this? Because
Right.
it's the kind of language that might trick you into thinking it's easy to make. And I feel like, having written a lot, that I know better. These are carefully rendered sentences, and the simplicity of them is deceptive. I've read reviews of your work when it's talking about the comedic effect that you achieve, which is also, it's this offbeat humor. The prose, and this is not a pejorative, is sometimes described as like this flat. It's got kind of like a deadpan effect. You're not really winking much at the reader.
Yeah.
But there is like kind of an odd offbeat humor to it. You talk a little bit about your intentions in that department, and like, is there anything you can tell us specifically about how you do it, to like make...
I wish I knew how I do it. Like, my brother is a stand-up comedian, and I can't try to be funny. Like, I can't. And in real life, I'm always cracking jokes, and they just sound too much like I'm not. And so it really just seems like I'm saying sinister things about people, and I get odd looks all the time. Like, it works better on the page than it does in real life.
Yeah.
And so I guess I have to be funny. I mean, in this book I'm doing, like, people, I didn't even really realize that I was writing about trauma, but I'm always being funny, and I don't know how to do it. So I can't like give like a writing class, like how to write humorous fiction, because I just don't know. And I feel like that's a lot about writing, is if I knew how to do it. I don't know that I couldn't do it. Like, it just comes.
I want to talk about genre and like
Right.
cross-pollination.
Okay.
Because I want to say in your last book, Very Nice, you were drawing on soap opera,
I love, yeah.
right? Like, it was like soap, like...
I didn't even hide it. I was a little bit embarrassed because I was sort of outing myself as somebody who had watched General Hospital for a really long time. But yeah.
Listen, I grew up on that stuff. I grew up
Yeah.
I had sisters and a mom, and in the 80s or whatever, like, we used to have like a VHS machine, and my sister would tape All My Children. Well, I even know like the order and the day in which they aired.
That's
It was like All My Children, Days of Our Lives, Another World, Santa Barbara, General Hospital.
Oh, General Hospital came last. It's the only one still on the air, I think. So.
Really? God, I mean,
One other soap opera. I think there's almost none left. But my brother used to watch General Hospital because he went to a tennis camp, and that was how he picked up girls. Was he would sort of watch it in the lounge with all the girls, and that's how he met girls that way. And so he came home from tennis camp and watched General Hospital, and then my sister and I started watching it too.
yeah, I mean, I grew up, I sometimes wonder, like, well, those were like kind of central narratives of my childhood, if I'm being honest. I mean, I really watched a lot of soap operas. And I remember, for example, when Stefano DiMero pushed Roman Brady off of a cliff in Days of Our Lives in like 1984. Like, Bo and Hope were in like a dinghy, I want to say, and they saw him fall, and they were like, Roman! It was really hardcore for me, because I mean, I was like so invested in these characters, and so, and then there was like, John Black, Patch. There are all these characters that I remember from this era, but
Maybe they taught us narrative in a way. I don't know.
yeah, like I don't know how well, but here we are. I guess
really terrible writing, of course, awful plotting, but they also go there, I guess. So.
Well, they go there, and they do like move the story along, and there is obviously a lot of like melodrama and emotional content. It's like maximal in that way, and maybe there's something to learn from that as a literary fiction writer. And I think really any kind of storytelling can be instructive depending on what we choose to take from it. And the question that I'm building towards with respect to Hurricane Girl has to do not with the melodrama of soap operas, which you've already sort of done in a previous book, but with the collision between horror and comedy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how explicit your attention to like horror movie plot and structure and tropes was in the rendering of this book. I know you said you don't outline.
Yeah.
So were you just kind of intuiting and feeling your way through this, or was it something you started with where you were like, wow, I really love horror and I want to try to blend this in?
Yeah, no, I actually really dislike horror. I mean, a long time ago, I watched Scream because I think I had a crush on Neve Campbell, of all things. But yeah, I think horror is really scary, and I don't know why people want to watch it. And it really, I think it's just like whenever most writers who are writing well, when you put something into a book, you end up using it. And I've been writing too often, I feel like, about writers as characters. Like, maybe I need to do some research. So in Hurricane Girl, instead of making her a writer, I made her a screenwriter, which is still a writer.
Right.
So I didn't really change it, but I made her into a horror writer. And all of a sudden, I was just like, oh, you have to use this. And so it just became so exciting when I realized I didn't really know that the cameraman was going to hit her on the head. That's a big spoiler, but it's on the back cover of the book, until he did it. But then I just kind of got this like sort of like tingle, like, oh, I'm writing horror in this book. And so, but it's not a genre that I know, because I just find these movies too scary to watch, honestly.
I used to watch a ton of them when I was an adolescent, which I think is like, like that's a normal era for a person to be into horror. I've read that there's like
teenagers, right, in the houses, and the virgins always get killed. So yeah,
it's sort of like built for adolescents. But as you know, nowadays, like I cannot imagine watching a horror film before going to sleep or something.
Yeah,
it's too much.
Yeah,
I feel like the everyday life is horrifying enough. I don't need any like steroidal horror, to tide me over. But with these kinds of subjects in mind, soap operas, horror films, more broadly speaking, I think what we're talking about is pop culture. And I feel like going back to when I first got to know you or knew of you, I mean, we go back a ways. I was thinking about this. Like we go back to when we were both starting out. I mean, you and I are contemporaries, I think. And I remember MySpace days when Twins was coming out.
That's where I got started. I was one of the first. I felt like, I was obsessed with it. I was just like, I'm going to get 3,000 followers. And
I mean, same kind of era. We were coming into publishing, and our agents were probably like, you should try this, social media thing. We were right at the beginning of social media. Yeah. But I remember you writing film criticism, if I'm recalling correctly.
I did.
So I want to hear you talk about that, like how you started out, and like I want to hear you talk more about your relationship to pop culture and pop culture narratives, and how you think it might still inform the work that you do as a fiction writer.
Yeah. I mean, I used to love film, and I actually feel like a real loss that I don't really watch it that often anymore. I mean, since COVID, I've stopped going to the movies, but even with streaming it at home, I feel so much more drawn to TV and to 1 hour narratives, and I don't quite understand why and what's changed, and I feel very fidgety when I watch films. But I really feel like with my second novel, which was called Bad Marie, I was in a phase of my life where I was just watching so many French films, and I just loved them so much that I wrote that book. I kind of wanted it to be like a French film, and I actually have like scenes in that book where I can think of a scene in a film, like from the particular movie, and I'm like, I almost like rewrote that scene and I put it in my book, and I don't do that anymore. So I'm not sure like what has changed, or maybe I've lost something from that.
I feel the same way. I used to go to the movies all the time.
I mean, for me, it was like the big thing when I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and I used to take the bus into New York, and I'd go see art house films. That was what I did, and sometimes I would take friends, but that was like the equivalent of my Sunday night was going into New York to see movies, and so I used to do that a lot.
It's just
My Life as a Dog was the first movie I saw. It just blew my mind. I don't know. It was just so lovely and Swedish, and I just saw it like 3 times, and it made me cry, and I just love things that can make me cry. I just feel like that's really great. Like I want to be able. I don't think I do that stuff, but I feel like that's such an achievement. I don't know.
Yeah, no, if you can make people like any kind of like strong emotion, but especially like a physical emotional response, like tears, it's like, wow. And I think too about the theater experience with a sense of mourning, because I don't think it's going to fully go away. Maybe it'll have a resurgence, but I do think generationally, I look at my kids, they have really not nearly the level of exposure to the theater experience, particularly with COVID in mind, that I did at their age. And I fear that it would go away. And the reason I fear so much is because there's something about the communal experience of going into this darkened theater together to kind of share in this dream time. Mm-hmm. And it is like a secular sacred space, like an opportunity to sort of shut the world out and like go into a dream, some kind of narrative. And I don't know, I have like so much reverence for that. It makes me sad to think that I haven't been to the theater in literally years. It's literally been years now since I've been to a movie.
Me too. It is sad.
We got to go to the movies, Marcy.
Yeah, right. I'm still. This isn't maybe for a podcast. I'm still in the part of COVID where I still wear a mask a lot when I go inside, and I think about going to a movie theater and wearing a mask for 2 hours, and it just seems so unenjoyable to me that I'm just waiting still for the time when I just don't want to wear a mask inside. So
yeah, I got invited by a friend the other day to go see the new David Cronenberg, and I had COVID in April.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it was fortunately I got through it, but I feel like I'm probably okay to go into a movie theater since you have antibodies for a little while. But I also know certain people get COVID and then like a month later they get it again. So I was in the same boat. I was like, my son is immunocompromised, so we have to be extra careful. And I'm like, I don't know about a movie theater, like going in, and I don't want to sit there in a mask for 2 hours. Same thing. So maybe as soon as we can get hopefully back to, to a place where it's not, I don't know if we'll ever get there, but if we ever do, I think, start going to movies more often again and supporting.
Yeah, and I feel bad for filmmakers. I don't quite know how they're readapting, or they're making television. I feel like so many good filmmakers are making TV now. So
I want to talk to you about the book itself, Hurricane Girl. And you have a character named Allison Brody, who, as you mentioned, is a screenwriter. She has left her boyfriend, who has a swimming pool in Silver Lake. Mm-hmm. And she has bought a house on the coast of North Carolina with a small inheritance that she has after her father passed away. And the book begins basically with the obliteration of this house.
I know. It's like by page 2, I think it's pretty much gone.
Yeah. So you start there. You basically start with this character who's losing all of her worldly possessions.
Yeah.
And from there, she gets into trouble, basically. And I mean, it's kind of like it's such an unexpected novel in so many ways. The kind of the adventure that she goes on, the things that happen in this book, it all operates according to its own odd logic. And somehow you pull it off. But I think about the way like this book might square with like ordinary lived reality. It's kind of a funhouse mirror reality. Like there's so much about it that's recognizable, and yet it also feels a little surreal. I
think so. I just read it recently because I had, you write things and then it takes so long for it to come out. And I was really surprised by it all the time, and I got really worried. Like, I think there's scenes in the book where she's like, if I were in a movie, people would be screaming, no, don't go. And while I was reading it, I was actually thinking, no, don't do that. Get out of that house. Like, I felt it reading it, so it worked on me because I had enough distance from it. So I was always surprising myself while I was writing it. And I mean, the whole idea about how, I feel like I've talked about this before, beach houses to me are unattainable. Like, many people have them. I don't think I'll ever have a beach house because I think they're just economically just impossible. And maybe it's also, who deserves a beach house? But so I think that's where I started this book, with somebody getting a beach house and having it taken away. And that was sort of my starting point.
Well, I think, economically impossible for most of us, but also increasingly ecologically impossible for all of us.
I've been reading about in this case in North Carolina, I put her beach house about 2 blocks away from the ocean, but I've been reading about people buying beach houses on little shelter islands on stilts. People buy houses on stilts, and they've literally been like destroyed before they even move in. And so, but what a stupid thing to do, I guess. Buy a house like that.
That's what I think. I mean, a coastal house in Florida seems like a short-term investment with like minimal returns and possibly huge losses. I don't know how people are making sense of that, but I guess if you have enough money and you can afford to lose it, then go for it. But I could say the same thing about a desert house. Like, we're already running out of water. You really want to move to the desert?
I know. There's just so many places that feel off limits now that were just dreamy at one point. It's really sad. I mean, the fires in California, I haven't lived through them, but I can't really imagine what that's like. It must just...
Well, now it's just a normal feature of the year. It's like a season, but it's an increasingly long season. It's like it used to be just like, September, October,
right?
Fire season. But now it's like September through December and January, and that gets a little bit crazy. You basically have to wait for the first big rain, assuming it comes, before you can start to breathe easier. But it's a big mess, and we've got water restrictions now
Oh, you do? See, I wasn't aware of that. Wow.
Yeah, we can only water our lawn. Like they just announced it, but you can only water your lawns on Mondays and Fridays where I live for like 15 minutes or less.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So you mentioned earlier, just a bit ago, that Allison sustains a head injury when a man that she is with hits her in the head with a vase, which is, again, you talk about like the odd logic of this book and its narrative. Like that comes as a shock. That's like a horror movie thing, where all of a sudden this extremely violent, awful thing happens. It frankly caught me a little bit by surprise. Like I wasn't expecting it, and
I'm glad that you weren't expecting it.
I'm normally always expecting somebody to hit somebody in the head with a vase, but no, it was it has like this kind of shock to it that feels familiar in the manner of a horror film, where you're like, whoa, and it also is a big pivot in the book's plot. It's like, whoa, this thing just took a turn that I was totally not seeing coming, and we've just gone 90 degrees here, and now I'm on board, and I don't have any clue what's coming next, which is always a lovely feeling to have as a reader. As it goes for Allison, this is a pretty serious head wound. Yeah. It's also, and I hate to say this, it's also kind of funny. In a macabre way. The way that you write it, there's kind of like this, she's driving back to Jersey with like a hole in her head, essentially. Yeah. And I was sort of thinking about, do you know the band The Flaming Lips? Yeah. Wayne Coyne, like in I don't know if he still does this, but back in the day, he used to like, during their shows, he used to like put fake blood on his head.
Didn't know that.
And he would like sustain a massive head wound basically in every concert, and like he'd like sing the last songs of the show, and he'd have like fake blood.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, but I was like, that's such an interesting choice. Yeah. And this reminded me of that. This Allison head wound. She's carrying this head wound with her essentially the whole novel. And what I want to ask you about is whether or not the brain injury that she sustains, what is it, a depressed fracture? Is that what it was called?
Yeah, I think so.
Whether or not this influenced decisions that you made with the prose. Like, were you thinking like, wow, I've got to render this in a manner that might be consistent with somebody who has sustained a head injury? And did that require research of any kind medically?
I did do some research. I absolutely did, because I've never experienced brain trauma. And so I just went to Google and I did that. And I learned about people who wake up from surgery and they're sitting up, like held back. Like and I actually was reading somebody's memoir. I edit people's books is like my other job. And I actually edited a memoir about somebody whose son had emergency brain surgery in Hawaii. And it was just a complete coincidence, but she kept writing about the flashlight that they put in front of his eyes. I was like, oh, I'm going to use that, which I felt so guilty about. Right. So I had to do research, which isn't something I normally do when I write, but it didn't really affect the prose. Like I always just want to take credit for all the things that you're telling me that I do, but I just
Isn't it great when people tell you what you've done? You're like, oh yes, I did do that, of course.
But I mean, maybe I can ask you this. To me, like when I wrote, people don't talk so much about the scene set in a hospital, but I don't even understand how people sometimes can be doctors, because I find hospitals just so horrific, and I found them such unpleasant places to be in, that when I visit people, I just want to get out. There's just so much noise, and I just feel like they're completely attuned to making people better, but they're not trying to make a pleasant experience for somebody to be there. And the beeping, I feel guilty when I visit people, because I just find them so unnerving. And so I was trying to put that into the prose for sure.
I was glad that you did that, because I've had the same exact feeling. Yeah. I think in particular, I'm thinking about when we had our kids. Mm-hmm. And I was in the hospital with my wife, and of course, like they get you out of there so fast nowadays. You have the baby, and like 24 hours later, they're like wheeling you out to the parking garage. You can't even stand up. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I mean, it's like, dude, can't she have another couple days with some attendance and some help? But I just remember, how exhausted Carrie was after giving birth. And I'm just like, I just wanted to rest. But then they're like, the beeping is constant. People are coming in and out and poking and prodding. And it's like, this is what's crazy, is that I think the number one thing, or one of the top things that a person needs in order to heal from any injury, is sleep.
Yeah.
And you go to a hospital, and it seems like the entire arrangement is designed to torture you with sleeplessness.
And they wake you up.
Constantly.
Yeah.
And I get that some of this is necessity. I get
Right.
it. Like some of it you have to have, you have to switch the medicine or whatever it is, and there's just no way around it. But like, yeah, you'd think they might like close the door, build some machines that only beep out in the hallway, give people quiet time, like respect the people's need to sleep, the patient's need to sleep, but it just misses the mark too often.
No, it's horrible. Yeah.
And then it's also just depressing.
Very depressing. I can't even understand it. They wake you up if you want to have your lunch order. They wake you up so you can order your food. There was actually, this is something that I can just say that was autobiographical if you knew me that. I got all of this information really from visiting my father in the hospital when he was dying, and it was just such a terrible place. There literally was construction in the hallway when I went to go say goodbye to him. Like there was like jackhammering noise. I couldn't even believe it. So I don't know, but I kind of took all that information, and you don't even know when you're going to use it. And 3 years later, I put it in a book, and I feel like that's a little bit what life is like. Maybe that's like follow material, but anyhow, yeah. So I just kind of took all the experience of how awful it was to visit him, and I put it in my book, and I made it her experience, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad, and it's like I know that nurses and doctors do heroic work.
They do. I don't know how they do it in those circumstances, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. It's just like but you talk about food, the meals, and this is another thing. You need sleep to be healthy, and you need good food to be healthy. These should be fundamental truths of the medical profession. But yet, I remember being at the hospital. Like if you want to go to a depressing hospital, go to a children's hospital sometime. I've spent some time in, thankfully not for anything super serious, but like I've had to spend a week in a children's hospital with my son before, and I basically living there, and it was also during COVID.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so you can imagine how insulated it was, but you'll just like walk down the hall and you'll like just be walking past a room. I remember seeing some poor kid who just was like really born with a lot, and he was like having a full seizure, and there were like 3 nurses trying to kind of like stabilize him. And then like you'll take a left and go down to the elevator, and the elevator doors will open, and there'll just be a mom with her like hands covering her face, just like weeping in the elevator, and you're just like riding down, just like you don't know what to say, just like you see awful things in a children's hospital. Yeah. And then you think about the nurses and doctors who work there and what they must deal with daily. Yeah. It's unthinkable. And then I'll go downstairs to get some food, and it's like fast food. Yeah. there's like a Sbarro pizza and like a Panda. Oh, really? I don't know, but it's like the same thing, and you're like.
Once I was in a hospital once in Austria of all places, and it literally was like a mall in the basement of the hospital there. So it was like a whole city. It was so big. So yeah.
But it's like, really, is this going to make people well to be eating like Panda Express in their hospital room? But I don't know. I don't know what the answers are, but it feels like there should just be like a farmer's market in the hospital.
That's a good idea.
But that might be, I don't know. Maybe that's the yuppie in me talking, but I feel like it's healthier. We need fruits and vegetables and good foods for people who are sick. Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about the universe of Marcy Dermansky novels. Mm-hmm. I will confess that I'm not a completist yet, but I have read Bad Marie, The Red Car, Hurricane Girl. I think those are the 3 that I've read.
That's good. You missed Twins and Very Nice, I think.
Okay, yeah. On my list. I'll get there.
Okay.
But I want to point out that I am noticing some recurring motifs in your work. Mm-hmm. And I don't think this will be a complete list, but I'm going to give you some things that I've noticed. Okay. Red cars.
That was my hugest Easter egg in this book, right?
Yeah. I was like, okay. But you have a novel called The Red Car.
I loved putting that red car in this book. And honestly, if you really are paying attention, in The Red Car, I never say what kind of car it is. And that drove people crazy. They all wanted to know what model of car it is. But if you read this book, I kind of give it away.
Wait, I'm trying to remember what it is.
It's nothing that interesting. It's a funny thing. It's not an interesting car, which is why I didn't say what it was in the book. But I say what it is in the red car that she rents is essentially the red car of the red car. And that was really to please me, but there are some people who are catching it. So that was not a coincidence. I knew what I was doing there. Sometimes I don't know. This time I did.
I feel like this is the thing that filmmakers do more often than writers of fiction, where they, like I'm thinking of Tarantino. He's got all these Easter eggs in his movies.
Yeah.
I'm sure
this was the first time I've ever really experienced doing that, and it was really thrilling.
Okay, so. But no, because there are swimming pools in multiple novels of yours.
Oh, yeah.
Swimming is a huge thing for you. Like not only as a writer of fiction, but I think you're an avid swimmer in your life, right?
Yeah, like today's my birthday. I think I told you. So it was
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I swim on my birthday. That's what I do because it's early in June and it's usually warm enough. And so I managed to meet people. I wouldn't even consider them friends, but I actually posed it to them as like being a supporter of the arts, and they let me go swim in their pool on weekdays when their children are in school until my public pool opens, because the pools don't really open every day until July. So I was able to go swimming. It's just happiness making, and I find it strange to me. It's like, if this is how things are for me, I don't know why they aren't so for other people. I don't understand why more people don't join the pool and don't go swimming, and I'm constantly trying to convince other parents to join the pool. I'm like, why aren't you going swimming this summer? But so I put it in my fiction, and I put it in, and it's a huge part of my real life. So
why does it make you so happy?
I don't know. There's something about being underwater that just feels so good. I do remember when I was pregnant, I belonged to a gym, and I just felt weightless while I was swimming. It was just this incredible thing about how it just feels just so lovely. I don't know if you have a headache and you go underwater. And one of the things that I did during COVID, which was really like the best thing, sometimes people ask you what's the best thing you did, is I was worried that the pools weren't going to open, and they did, but not for a long time, is I took really expensive private lessons in somebody's swimming pool just so that I could go swimming. And she really improved my stroke. It was like unbelievable. She told me to put my arm in a different place, and suddenly I was gliding longer, and like my swimming just improved. It was just wonderful. So that was a funny thing that happened.
I love to swim too.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
I like to be in the ocean.
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, I'm sort of afraid of sharks in like a natural human way, but like, I'm willing to accept that fear. Like
in cold water, if you have to, it's worth it. It just, everything changes. Yeah. The ocean is just so like, it's exhilarating jumping through waves, I feel like. So.
Yeah. I like to boogie board. That's what I've gotten into in my midlife, which I feel like somewhat inclined to apologize for, because it's not as cool as surfing.
I don't do either. I just like to be in the water. I once went water skiing. I'm like, what's the point of this? You're on top of the water. So.
Yeah, you want to be in it. It's like maybe there's something primal, or it's like a replication of the experience of being in the womb or something. But it's just lovely to swim, and it's great exercise too. Yeah. It's a great way to be healthy, and I think, as I get older, I'm like, God, I would love to eventually be able to have a pool so that I could stay healthy, because it's an exercise that you can do for a long time. Like there's certain things you do in your youth that you can't do as easily as you get older, but swimming you can do.
It doesn't hurt your bones.
That's right. Yeah. It's easy on the joints.
Totally.
So another thing that I've noticed as a recurring motif is in your work, not just in this book, but in others, is violence against women. This is a recurring theme, and I saw it in, I think it was mentioned in the red car. Yeah. Right? There was a bad boyfriend in the red car, if I'm remembering correctly.
It was.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember Bad Marie. My poor memory is going to fail me. But can you just talk about that? I'm interested. Like, this is something that's a concern of yours in your fiction.
It's a concern of mine. I mean, I don't. It's like I do have trouble talking about it, and it's not really stemming from a particular trauma that I've experienced, but I guess relationships are, in this book I sort of hint at the Me Too movement, and I mention Ashley Judd, and I think there's just so many, like in this book, for instance, my agent was very much like, all the men are terrible, and I'm like, no, I really like Danny Yang. Danny Yang is the doctor that Allison Onion has a romantic relationship for. I'm like, he's so wonderful, and I was happy that she was with him. I think she was initially with him because he had a swimming pool, but
which is
He was.
which
That's
is
sort of
which
the
is
joke.
I can think of worse reasons to be with somebody.
Yeah, like I don't think they would have ever gotten together if he didn't have a pool on his roof. But then he was great for her. So it's not like I want to make like 100% universal declarations of anti-maleness, because I don't feel that way at all, even a little bit. But I guess I'm more interested in writing in female characters. It's just true, and sometimes I think that's because I don't work that hard in my writing. I have written male characters. I had 2 male points of view in Very Nice, and it was fun. But I guess that comes less naturally to me. And so, I guess I do feel like violence against women is sort of statistically, it's out there, and so
well, and it's also one of these things that, I don't know, for me as a reader, it's kind of shocking. You're just kind of like, oh, and like it's shocking, even though it shouldn't be.
It's as a woman, by the way, when terrible things happen to you, it's so shocking. It's like unbelievable. It's like just the same as having a vase crasher on your head when somebody hurts you that you love. So I mean, I guess it's supposed to be shocking when I write about it.
Yeah, I know, but it's like statistically though, it shouldn't be, and yet then it happens on the page or on the screen or in real life, and it's like, what?
Yeah. I guess I almost had her attacked to like serve the plot, to move the plot forward, but I didn't really think about it in those terms. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like I wasn't conscious of what I was doing.
Well, yeah, it's funny. You said earlier in the conversation, like briefly, you were like, yeah, people have been telling me that like I wrote about trauma, and like you weren't thinking about it explicitly in those terms as you were going.
Yeah, right.
So what were you thinking about? Like what was explicit? You were like, I want to tell a story about like a horror, like I want to work on horror tropes, or was it I want to do a kind of an odd romantic comedy, or did you not even know? You're just feeling your way through line by line.
I really was feeling my way through line by line, and I really, I don't think I knew any, and I don't think this is surprising of me for any of my books. I don't know. And I actually really appreciate having people come afterwards and telling me what I did, and then I'm like, yes, that is exactly what I meant to do. I do that all the time. But I think it's almost like, I mean, I live my life, like it's sort of like every day I wake up, I feel like I'm recreating life again. It's so strange. I think it's part of not having a full-time job, and like every day I wake up and I have to write a list, like this is what I'm going to do today, and I check things off, but it feels like I should know what I'm going to have for lunch every day. You know what I mean? I'm still sort of surprised that I have to figure it out every single day. I think I have to make things easier at a certain point, but I think with writing it's just like I'm figuring out my novel every day the character goes through. But it's really in novels, I think it's so much more important to jump through time. Like this book happens in a very short, compressed period of time. But otherwise, I think it's really good to, like, and I love that about writing. You can just jump ahead a month, or you can jump ahead a year. You can play with time, and you can make things. I think when you write, you want to make things a lot more interesting than real life is. Like, real life is really dull,
Yeah, you know what I read the other day? I was reading Twitter, and I'm gonna name check her. It was Amanda Fortini. Do you know Amanda Fortini?
I know who she is. I know I even follow her, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know her either. I've never met her in my life, but I feel like I know her because I've been reading tweets by her for a long time, and I feel like the algorithm bequeaths certain people to me that I don't know, but yet they, for some reason, this is what Twitter has determined I should be reading, and anyway, she was just talking about a conversation that she had with a writing teacher of hers back when she was just beginning as a journalist, and she kind of got an assignment. It was like her first big assignment, and she wrote it, and then she showed it to her teacher to say, like, what do you think of this? And he was basically like, there's not much insight here or energy in it. You need to rewrite it.
Yeah.
And then I think this teacher was like, writing is a performance. You have to make this, it was basically saying, like, make this better for the reader.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I mean, I know it can be so crushing, and sometimes writing teachers can just be wrong, and they can also be right. I love it when they're right. Do you know what I mean? I hate hearing stories about how teachers will just crush all the hope out of a writer, and I never want to do that to somebody else.
No. She was writing this as an appreciation,
Good,
remembering. But that line, like, this is a performance on the page.
Yeah.
That you're making.
I mean, one of my writing teachers in graduate school, Frederick Bartholomew, it kind of blew my mind at the time. He's like, why don't you start your books, not just to me, he tells everyone, on your first line. Like, if this is somebody's, like, 50th anniversary party, why wait till, like, the middle of page 2? Tell us on the first line. And so I do try to do that in my books. Like, the first paragraph, it's already starting. Like, you don't want to take your time. And that's not because people tell you that an agent reads the first 3 pages. It's because that's what's better for books, is you have to start right away.
Yeah, and Hurricane Girl definitely does that.
Yeah.
It's like this staccato beginning. I want to say it's like 3 independent lines, or I wish I had a better memory. Short. But it's like Allison Brody bought a beach house. Mm-hmm. She was, I forget what it is, but it's a great end. It's a great beginning, and it brings you right in, and it lays down the stakes plainly.
Yeah, and I always want to do that. So I do have some intention. That's good to know, right? Yeah. Yeah,
well, and I think that's a good lesson. Drop people in the middle of the river. No sense starting things on the shore, You want to get people into it right away. Mm-hmm. So as I continue this conversation with you about recurring tropes, I'm just curious, but like poodles?
I grew up with standard poodles. Yeah.
Okay, so you have affection for poodles.
Yeah. Sea lions I've put into 2 novels, and so...
Pelicans. I was going to say sea creatures are a big figure. You like the sea.
I do like the sea, and I went to Miami about 4 years ago. I haven't been on a lot of trips, and so what I realized, because I put Miami in my novel and I put pelicans in my novels, is that I really do need to take more trips, because where do we get our material from? So I haven't been traveling enough. So.
I feel like travel is as fertile as it gets, like for the imagination. Like it's just like these big, huge sense impression experiences, especially when you're in a place that you've never been to before, where it's all new, and that kind of like makes the world new in this really overt way. Like that can be really helpful as a writer. It just kind of breaks you out of yourself.
I think so too.
Where do you want to go? What's on your list?
I mean, I do want to go to Iceland, which is like all about swimming, and
what, in those hot springs kind of thing?
Yeah, I would love to do that. And I've just seen pictures. And I don't know, I feel like as I get older, and it's something I want to fight against, is I feel like traveling has just been so stress and provoking, inducing for me, that I've been wanting to travel less. Like it feels just much easier not to have to go to an airport. And I don't want that to be who I am. It's something I actually want to fight against.
Yeah, I want to be able to keep going and keep exploring and not be somebody who's like, you know what, I'll just stay home and watch another limited series. Yeah. Which is what I feel like the world is sort of designed for that. It's like, with COVID and with all the different stressors of life, it feels like that's what all of it is sort of pushing us toward. It's like, I'll just stay in.
Yeah.
I'll just sit here and watch another show. That can't be the answer.
That way, and I don't want that to be the case. So we'll see what happens. I'm not sure.
Last thing I'm going to ask you about tropes, because you like animals, is cats. Because cats figure very much into Hurricane Girl. Mm. And then I'm thinking about the standard poodle thing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, is Marcy, like, where are you on the spectrum of dog person versus cat person? Are we experiencing that?
I've done a complete 180. I used to be a dog person, and I grew up with dogs, and they were so important to me. And I'm going to gain readers and lose readers when I say I really don't have much patience for dogs anymore, because they're just so loud. They're so loud. I just want old golden retrievers to come and pet, but I don't want dogs to bark at me, and I don't want them to jump on me. And I have 2 cats now because my daughter really wanted cats, and it's just ridiculous how smitten we are with our cats. We're just over the top silly. We just love our cats so much, and we talk about our cats, and we point at our cats. And those are my cats in the book. Like, I didn't even try to change them. They're orange and white, and one is really big and one is less big. And I put them in the book because I just wanted to. I just like having touchstones. And so I actually think that this is my first book with cats.
Okay, I think I'm gonna make a prediction here. I'm gonna slide my chips into the center of the table, and I will wager that there will be more cats in future Marcy Dermansky work.
I'll be very self-conscious, but I think you're right about it. Yeah.
I also can't help but think of Gibson, the dog in the book, who I feel like is. And now I'm like, wow, this is the critique of dogs that Marcy just laid out. Gibson is a. But listen, I have a dog. She's actually behind me. She's behind me right now.
See, you might have gotten really mad at me just then. I'm sorry.
No. I would have cats. I love cats, but my wife is really allergic and becomes it's just misery for her to be around a cat. And I guess you can kind of power through it, and eventually you become sort of immune to your own cat or something. Like the allergies lessen, but it's just always been kind of a deal stopper because of the allergies. And I think my daughter has that same allergy. And I would otherwise have cats, and then I have a dog And I'm always big on training my dog, to the point where people make fun of me for it.
Well, I'm so glad that you do, because I think that's a real problem. If
That's
people trained their dogs more, I think I would love them again, you know?
that's
Yeah.
my argument, is that
Yeah.
who wants to be around a dog that is obnoxious and is jumping all over you and barking
Absolutely.
and doesn't
Yeah.
do what it's told. I mean, like, these are dogs. It's like people, I think, they humanize them, or they project their own emotions onto them. And I'll see it all the time. Like, this is where it really gets controversial with friends of mine who think I'm like the dog Nazi. But it's people who are like, oh, my dog just wants to say hello.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't want to say hello to your dog. And my dog doesn't want to say, I'm not here to say hello. Like, I feel like Seinfeld or something, just like kind of.
Great. I wish more. I mean, I have a feeling I would love your dog. You know what I mean? Because your dog's been trained, and so. I mean,
It's like I'm listening to a podcast or something, and I'm walking, down the sidewalk, and somebody is invariably coming towards me, being pulled on the leash by their dog. Their dog is completely out of control. And they're just like smiling, like, oh, she just wants to say hi. And I'm like, really? I'm in the middle of, listening to NPR here, or whatever it is, and like, this wasn't on my list of things to do, was to stop here and let your dog like hump my dog. It's like, and it's just because they don't train their dog. Mm-hmm. I'm like, train your dog. Then your dog won't say hello.
Such a Brad Listi fan.
Yeah. This is a hill I'm willing to die on. But
okay, wow.
A craft question that I want to touch upon. I was reading some of the interviews that you've done, like print interviews that you've done previously, and something that you said struck me, and I want to hear you talk about it because I think writers listening might benefit. Is you said that the best way whenever you're stuck in your writing is to switch POVs. I think that maybe is speaking in particular to Very Nice, which has multiple POVs. Yeah. But is that something that carries over from book to book, and is it just like
this book was, Hurricane Girl was one POV, but my very first novel, which was called Twins, and it just seems so obvious, is it's from alternating POVs from each twin. But the first, while I was writing it, I literally got to like page 150 and I was really stuck. And then I wrote from the twins' point of view, and it just the other twins' point of view, and opened everything up. And then I had to go back into the book and write new scenes for her. But I don't think every book should do that. Every book needs different things. But I do feel if you're ever stuck, you can either enter a new POV, and if you don't want to go that extreme, I also feel like bringing in a new character can just help. Just so much. I feel like you just need to grab something new if you really don't know what you're doing. And that can work or that cannot work. I think I mentioned, that's the thing, it can work or it cannot work. That sometimes when I'm stuck, I think you just don't want to forge blindly ahead with what you have. I think you just want to surprise yourself too.
Well, that makes some sense to me though. Like even in a book where you have a single POV, if you find yourself stuck, like even as a useful creative exercise, if you just did like, well, I'm going to write from this. I know this is not going to wind up being the novel, but I'm going to write from this secondary character's POV today. It might give you a new angle on the material, like literally, and it helps you to distance yourself from it in a new way or something. So I see the logic in it. I'm wondering, because I know you've worked with me, like I worked with you on a draft of my novel as an editor. I'm wondering if how the work that you do as an editor informs the work that you do as a writer. I have to believe it's beneficial. Are there ever times when you feel like it's not?
I never feel like it's not, and I feel like I must get things from my clients' writing. Sometimes it's the same as with teaching, that it's so close to what you do that sometimes it's really. I'm really bad at multitasking. So if I'm editing somebody's book, I don't want to be writing at the same time. Or if I'm and so that's one thing I found. But I feel like my knowledge as a writer, I know a lot of people who hire editors, and they're editors. I feel like as a writer, I feel like I'm really good at going into people's work and pinpointing things or saying try that or being encouraging. I don't feel particularly inspired by the work. Like I don't get inspiration from the work.
Well, it's because it's sort of like.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like a surgeon. Just to continue with our earlier medical discussion, it's like a surgeon going in and doing work. You're not going to like come away from it inspired. It's more like you're just going in there to get the job done or something, or to.
But I feel like I want to be so careful because writers, I just feel like, are so sensitive. And if I tell a writer everything I think needs to be fixed, it's just like so overwhelming that you can't do it. And I think, like, I know that, like, when my agent edits my work, by the way, he never goes in on a line basis. He just says, oh, you need to make something happen, and it works for me. But I feel like sometimes people need a lot more than that. So, but I feel like writers as a rule are sensitive, or very sensitive, and you just don't want to be too honest with them. I feel
well, yeah, I had that feeling when I was teaching years ago, where my students would submit work, and some of it would be okay, some of it would be really bad, and yet I was always hesitant, or I felt it just, I could have taken a red pen to it and just gone completely nuts. But what I always worried about was, wow, if I do this, I could wind up stifling or badly harming somebody who actually is gifted and who otherwise would forge ahead. Like, the damage that I could do messed with me is the point, and I didn't want to play that role.
I feel that way. Like, I feel stressed. Like, I feel worried at night sometimes. Like, what am I going to write in this letter? Like,
Well, but I think maybe your approach is the wise one, which is to, like, maybe try to prioritize and locate, like, a small handful of big things, the biggest and most important things, and to send them on their way with that and see what they make of it. They might figure out the rest, the smaller stuff on their own if they keep drafting. And I think that the way that your agent works with you, especially for somebody who's got some experience and some chops, and has kind of been to a few rodeos or whatever, I feel like you kind of give somebody a nudge, like, this section doesn't, that's all you need. And then you go in.
Yeah, that's all you need. And then I don't have to say, but what about this? I just know where to go. And
so I want to be respectful of your time. I know we both have kids and it's almost summer. So the last thing I want to ask you about is screenwriting and adaptations, because this book features Alison Brody, the protagonist, who is a screenwriter. We've talked about your love of cinema and, this sort of grief we both feel about that lost experience. Yeah. I am wondering if you have experience screenwriting or aspirations in that direction, if any of your work, including this book, if there are plans for adaptation or hopes for adaptation.
I mean, I've had such a ride with Hollywood at this point, because nothing I've had done has been adapted, but very nice actually went all the way up to having, like, a major A-list movie star attached to it, and then a production deal with Apple TV, and then that didn't happen. And I actually have a beautiful filmmaker who's really interested in Hurricane Girl right now, and we're in early stages, but it's so hard to get something made.
Yes.
And I just want something made so badly, like, I can't even tell you, and just so much, just to sell more books. I really want more people to read my books, but I can't write screenplays. And I feel like if I could, maybe things would happen, because I could say, here's my screenplay, make a movie, make a TV show, but it's all dialogue. And I really love writing interior monologues. Like, that's just like, Hurricane is just, like, all in her head. So I don't know, I need somebody else to do that. And I'm willing to give over creative control, like, and just take a risk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've tried to write screenplays and I just don't know what to do. I'm like, how do I do this? Like, yeah.
It sounds like you'd have to write, like, a Terrence Malick screenplay, which is, like, all interior and just, like, walking through tall grass, like, which is what I feel like there's always people just, like, walking through tall grass to, like, a VO or something.
I should try that.
What about a fiction project? I know you tend to have these kind of, like, you have some downtime in between books, but is there anything cooking?
I wrote a short story that I loved over last summer, and people have told me to turn that into a novel, and I don't want to. And I started a book, and I got 70 pages into it, and I just changed my mind. It kind of killed me that I did that. And so right now, I just feel like I'm at that part of my process. My process is always the same. I have to not have anything cooking for so long, where I just love writing. And right now, I'm just not. I'm just putting out this book, which is great, but I just miss it. So I have nothing cooking, but I just feel like I always believe, I don't know why I can be so mean to myself. I always believe, I'm not going to be able to do this again. And of course I'm going to be able to do this again. Like, of course I am, but I have nothing cooking. But I do go quickly because I never really managed, Brad, to get a proper job. So I just have to keep on writing books.
Congratulations. Yeah. And
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear you. I'm glad to hear you be candid about that part of the process, because I think that it can be dispiriting or disillusioning for people who are in it sometimes because they feel like it's not supposed to be happening. And I think there's some version of this for all writers, both like the 75 pages of a book that you wind up going, actually, no. And that's a horrible feeling because you've spent all this time and energy on it, and you have all this, it's like imbued with all this hope. You're like, this is going to be it, but then it's not it. And then there's just dead periods where you're not doing any writing. Yeah. And I don't know. It feels like a natural part of any kind of creative system. There are going to be these cycles, and I think you just have to learn, hopefully, to accept them and kind of go along for the ride. And have faith that it's going to eventually right itself.
Right. Because writing is just so great. So yeah, I'll feel better about life if I'm writing a little bit every day. So and I know that. I don't know if you've started something new after spending 10 years on a book.
Yes. I'm definitely concerned with not letting the next long period. I don't want it to be 10 years. So I'm trying to guard against that. I am working hard on a project, and it's just like I'm in this research phase, and it's it's it feels unwieldy. I've got to start drafting the actual book
that makes
soon.
Sense.
And I've got
if too much knowledge, it can be crippling too, I guess.
I've got a 4,000 plus page research document, just to give you an idea. So I can winnow that down.
Ready. Yeah.
So anyway, it's lovely to talk with you and to see you. And on your birthday,
nice listening to these, so happy to be able to be part of one of your podcasts.
Yeah, it's about time. And happy birthday to you. Spending this much time with me on your birthday is, I feel sympathy for you, frankly.
That was really nice.
Well, listen, best of luck with Hurricane Girl. Congratulations. Thanks. Enjoy your birthday, and best of luck to you on whatever comes next when it emerges.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, you guys, there we go. That was my conversation with Marcy Dermansky, author of the new novel Hurricane Girl, available now from Knopf. You can find Marcy Dermansky at marcydermansky.com or on social media, if that's your persuasion. She's on Twitter at mdermansky, and you can also track her down on Instagram and I believe Tumblr, if that's still a thing. One more time, the novel is called Hurricane Girl. Go get a copy of this book immediately. The Other People podcast is offered freely. This is a listener-supported show. The entire archive of this program is made available free of charge. The show depends on your support, and you can do that for as little as $1 per month over at patreon.com/otherpplpod. That's Patreon, patreon.com/otherpplpod. Throw $1 in the hat every month. It's easy. You can also throw more. As you move up the scale, you can get gear, a t-shirt, a tote bag, a coffee mug, a sticker, a book club subscription. I will wish you a happy birthday. I will send you a postcard in the mail. Patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you would like to get your hands on a copy of my new novel, it is called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything. It just published in May. It is out there in trade paperback, ebook, and audiobook editions. I am the narrator of the audiobook, if that excites you. It's called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything, and it is a novel. If you would like to sign up for my email newsletter, please do that at bradlisti.com or at this show's official website, otherppl.com. The email newsletter goes out once a week. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. I share news of the latest episode. I also share an enumerated list of some things that I've been reading online and elsewhere that have interested me. So to sign up for that, again, just go to one of my websites. It's easy. It's free. The Other People podcast has its own official app. Not sure if you're aware. It too is free. Go get the Other People with Brad Listi app wherever you get your apps. This show's entire archive is available on YouTube, so if you're a YouTube person, please search for the show by name, Other PPL with Brad Listi, and subscribe to the Other People YouTube channel. It's free, and it helps the show. I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and even better, if you would rate and review the show. That will help this program find new listeners. All right? I think that does it for today. Fun talking with Marcy Dermansky. I will be back next week with more.